B2B SaaS companies, start your brand as early as possible. Get your brand story and your ethos going as soon as possible.
Welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast, where experts discuss international content management, product localization, and global expansion. I'm Caterina from Undertow, and today our founder, Nicola Calabrese, will talk with Angeley Mullins, Chief Commercial Officer at Resourcify. Together, they will explore the challenges and strategies behind balancing a consistent global brand identity while tailoring it to meet local market expectations. From cultural nuances in bringing to the importance of storytelling for B2B SaaS companies. This conversation offers a lot of takeaways for everyone navigating international markets. Let's dive in.
Hello, Angeley, and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Really nice to be here.
And today we're going to talk about balancing a global brand and a local, let's say, branding. So I'll do it to balance these two aspects. But before we jump right into the topic, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit and tell us about your role at Resourcify?
Yeah, sure. So for all the listeners, I'm Angeley. I'm based in Berlin. You can tell from my accent probably. I'm not from Berlin. I'm from sunny San Diego. I've got a 20-year history in everything, marketing, sales, go-to-market, product launches, internationalization, and one of my favorite topics, brand. Started to work with big cap companies like your Amazon, Intuit, GoDaddy, and then moved into the scale-up world. And then my most recent role has been Chief Commercial Officer at Resourcify. It's a B2B sustainability platform that helps companies digitize and optimize their waste streams. And they're actually coming out with CO2 trackers, etc. So very cool space to be in. And again, really nice to be here today.
So we're going to start from there. Let's say a more general question. And how do you balance maintaining a consistent global brand identity while tailoring it as well to meet the unique preferences and expectations of local markets?
You know, one of the things that people kind of make a mistake about with brand is they think that you're going to have a different one in different markets as you do international expansion and localize. And that's actually not the case. You might have different localized campaigns and you might have a different message, but your core of your brand entity should remain the same. Your brand value, what you stand for, what I call the what do you believe message, that should be the same and it should be consistent because that's the ethos and the heart. I would say make sure for all the listeners to figure that point out first. And then when you go into localized campaigns, there can be different types of messaging, different maybe types of go-to-market, how you talk to your consumer, but overall tone of voice, overall identity should be the same. For all the listeners, I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an advantage on leveraging when you use localization as a leverage for growth as well, to keeping as much as you can of the global identity and the leverage and adapt for the specific market. And regarding that, I have a question about how does your team approach localization, not just in the terms of language, but also in terms of adapting your product value proposition to meet the specific business needs of each market. And here I'm thinking specifically about with Resourcify and more in general about the differences, for example, between Germany and the USA.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite cultural differences. So we always have this joke, and I'm an American, so I feel like we can make fun of ourselves. I always have this joke that Americans like to go to market and they'll sell you a vision and idea, and they don't even have it built yet. And take the quintessential iPhone launch. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the new iPhone, but everybody's waiting around the corner to get their hands on one, right? In Germany, what they do is the opposite, is they really invest into product and they try to make the product so perfect, and they're all about their methodology and their processes. And then only then do they actually think about if somebody wants to buy it. So it's actually the opposite. The American approach to branding and go-to-market is vision, inspiration, bringing people along in a belief system. The German way to go-to-market is processes, methodologies. I would also say in Germany, it's a lot more relationship building, but just to cover all of the different verticals, it's much more about your process and your methodology. And it even goes down to the way that people sell, the way that people pitch their companies and their ideas. I've seen a difference between the Germans and the Americans. The Germans get up there and they talk about the product specs and they dive in there. And then you see maybe I would say a minute to a minute and a half in, people are starting to kind of lose focus. And then you'll see the Americans come up and it's all vision. So it's a dichotomy. I say we can learn something from both. ways and we can learn something from both markets, but it's quite a contrast.
But if I understand correctly, when you're going into Germany, for example, you maybe lean a little bit more on the, let's say, functional benefits and the feature. And when you're in the US, you're more like on the vision and brand. You have both elements all the time, right? Just, let's say, a different mix for the same ingredients, just a different mix.
It's a different mix. They always say that the Americans, that's where some of the best marketeers and best, kind of visionary, inspirational type of leadership comes from, because it's really deep within the culture. So when you are trying to go to market, when you're trying to build a brand and sell, think of Nike. It's one of my favorite examples because everybody knows it. They don't go to market. They don't talk about the rubber or whichever material they're using in the shoe and the type of thread they're using in the laces. They're not doing that. You see their campaigns. It's called Find Your Greatness. And if you go to YouTube and you type it in, it's all these people overcoming adversity. And the shoe is just part of the story. It's just a tool to get you there. And they're selling you on this concept of your inner self. It's a very different way versus, I would say, maybe if Nike was in Germany, or you can go Adidas, maybe take a look at that one. But it's more about the components and what's new and the features. And that's okay, but it's just a different way of going about it.
And when looking at the, let's say, from the client, the customer's expectations, specifically in B2B, so do you see like any big difference, like from region to region, and now the branding strategy from the customer expectations point of view? Like what would they expect, even in terms of like different kind of materials, maybe they want to, or content they need to be exposed to before they actually make a decision?
The interesting thing about B2B is it's now catching up to where D2C has been. So e-commerce or D2C has really been about this branding, and the brand has really been solidified, where B2B, if you remember 5 years ago, was all product marketing features. And they would come out with these videos with the Shinsing music and we have a problem. Oh, there's a solution. Okay, great. B2B has now started to learn the benefits of having a brand ethos and a brand identity, something that retailers and D2C have known for ages. And what I call it, I call the original revenue driver. So this is what you're seeing in B2B, and B2B companies are now catching up. Even if you are a listener and you're representing a B2B company that's quite technical, look at Snowflake, for example. Very technical product. They're really focusing on their brand and their brand identity, and you can see their revenues are through the roof. B2B leaders, listen up. Branding has always been here. It's the original. It's the one to stay. And definitely take some lessons from your D2C counterparts.
Yeah, I think it was quite interesting recently at a conference I attended. Somebody was talking about the importance of branding when you have a committee is taking decision. When it's B2B, there's a committee, it's not just one person taking the decision. And most of the people involved, they're not the specialists in their, let's say, specific tool that they have to choose. And they most likely go with the brand that they know. Let's say a very specific platform, but they already know the brand. It's easier for them to choose that one rather than go into the details. So it's very underestimated how much branding has an impact as well on influencing the decision. Yeah, I completely agree.
So, I mean, even with outbound sales motions, which is very typical for B2B and especially to the enterprise segment, they said, okay, well, we have these target accounts and that's it. So we're just going to throw some SDRs at it and do outbound outreach. But if the SDRs are doing outbound and nobody knows who they are, and there's no brand identity, and you're Googling the name of the company and there's nothing that's coming up and there's no story, very, very difficult. And then what happens is, especially at an early stage of scale-ups are expecting their SDRs to be salespeople, right? Prospectors, branding people, content, and that's way too much to expect for an SDR. So this is where I tell especially our B2B leadership, do brand, do it early, get it solidified, because it's the gift that keeps giving.
And also, I guess, like it helps making ensure that it's consistent, the approach, because otherwise you rely on the specific SDR to do work and not everybody does it the same way. So you kind of standardize as well the way people perceive your brand as well. So I completely agree with that as well, yeah. And when you go into international branding efforts, like what metrics do you use to guide to see like how effective your campaigns are?
So, I mean, of course, brand awareness. You can measure the awareness of your brand. Usually it's done by a survey. The thing with this is you have to have enough brand awareness in the market to take such a survey. So this is one of the things. So for a company that's maybe later stage or has more brand equity and brand awareness, this could be great. If you're a small scale up, very difficult to have enough brand awareness to then be tracking it. So I would just say, if you're a small scale up, look at your clients, What drove the clients to you once they heard the story? How do they resonate? Because you're still in the process of growing your brand awareness. If you're a later stage company, there's brand trackers out there. There are market research tools that you can use, and you basically go down the entire funnel stage from awareness, preference, consideration, etc. But there are different ways to track it depending on what scale of stage that you're in.
And is there like any specific, let's say, KPI you will recommend for companies at the beginning, like to still track as what they can? Obviously, I do understand that they don't have a lot of data and they're still building the brand. Any specific KPI they think it would be beneficial, especially for those that are starting out, to see if there's traction, and that means like it's giving results so they can double down on that?
Just basic awareness numbers. When you're a small scale up, you're doing a lot of anecdotal. It's not like you can even go to your website and run a full A/B test or MBT test, because you're not going to have, and I mean very small scale ups with not a lot of traffic, you're not going to have enough traffic to even have statistical significance. In this particular use case, it's anecdotal. So think about the old style focus groups where you're going in, you have 5 to 10 prospects. You're asking each prospect, okay, well, maybe you saw this particular campaign. What resonated with you? Like, what are the particular components? And you're taking that anecdotal data, and then you kind of get those splot charts going on. And I'm sure with the AI tools now, they'll make it very pretty for you. But this is anecdotal, qualitative type of data, because you don't have mass market numbers to be able to do a full test to even worth buying any kind of tool. Because what is it going to track? Versus as you continue to grow in size and traffic and awareness, then you have proper things like tone of voice, Meltwater, PR. You can do these types of things. There are plenty of brand tracking softwares out there. You can look at companies like Brandwatch, this kind of thing. So it really just depends, again, on who you are as a company, where you are in your stage of scaling, and how much awareness you have in the market. But there are tools out there. I would just say, depending for the listeners, if you're a very small company that doesn't have any brand awareness, don't waste your money trying to buy a tool, because what would it track?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense, yeah. Since like a global B2B SaaS provider, you might face perception about your brand in different countries. It may change from one country to the other. So how would you address like any skepticism or hesitancy that the potential customer might have towards a foreign brand? Like, let's say a company from the US coming to let's say Europe, or the other way around. How would you recommend that to overcome that?
It was really interesting. So I'm going to take a D2C or retail CPG use case, which is Starbucks. So for all the listeners in Europe, I'm sorry, because I know people have their thoughts about Starbucks, but there's a very special kind of Starbucks coffee called Starbucks Reserve. And it is the premier Lux type of coffee. And these bags, so all the listeners, if you Google it, these bags are going for 80 euros plus a bag for just the beans. And they decided to open up one of their Starbucks Reserve locations in Milan, in Italy, in the heart of a country that's so well known for its coffee. And everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, you're a coffee roaster from Seattle. What are you doing? But the way that they positioned the brand was on the quality of the experiences, more than going toe to toe with very traditional and well-known Italian coffee roasters. They decided to go with the experience of going to a Starbucks Roastery Reserve. And I've been to one. I've been to the one in Seattle, and also to the one in Shanghai, China. You cannot beat this experience. It is the most quality, bespoke experience. You can watch them roast the coffee. You can watch them basically do all the drip. It is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm telling you that not only did the brand not only survive, but it thrived, but the revenues were going through the roof. So it's proven itself many times over. But I think your original question is internationally, how people are viewing it. At first, these different countries, they were scoffing at it. So you look at Italy, you look at China, they're like, what are you doing? Now they love it. And so I'm like, if a company like Starbucks can go into the heart of Italy and they can make this successful, it goes to show you it's not just about the immediate cultural reaction. It's about finding the differentiator. What makes you different? And in this case, Starbucks nailed it with their experiential way.
Yeah, I'm from Milan, actually, so I know the story you're talking about. It made quite a lot of noise when it was launched, because people thought it was going to crash bad, and actually it was quite successful. I still, when I go there, I see there's people queuing to get in the place. So it was really surprising. But it's true, like I haven't heard anybody say they go there for the coffees, right? You're right. Like it's a very, I've never been, but even from outside, you can see it's a very special place. Let's say they made a whole setup. Yeah, yeah.
It's a once in a lifetime experience. And I haven't been to the one in Milan, but the one in Seattle, everybody is there. And I'm thinking, okay, but that's Seattle. Then the one in China, I stood in line for 2 hours outside in Shanghai to get in there, and people were just going crazy for this experience. So with the branding, I mean, you can tell me how the one in Milan is, but Starbucks nailed it. And branding isn't just always about a look and a feel. It's about how it relates to the experience and how you feel when you do that experience. So they absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, it was a very, let's say, unconventional approach to this. Absolutely. Because you had all this still retail, but like a similar example in Italy with, I think, was Domino's Pizza. It didn't go that well in Italy, obviously. Again, like pizza,
Well,
it's a very important thing. Yeah.
Domino's Pizza is providing, but Starbucks went the other direction, of course. And I don't know if it was a designer from Copenhagen. There's a very special designer that they use to design all the interiors, the materials, just the way of the experience. It was amazing.
They chose a very beautiful building. It's a historical building, was really, really beautiful from outside as well. Yeah. And to close up, before we close up, what global trends do you think in branding, technology, or customer behavior do you foresee impacting the way B2B SaaS companies approach international branding in the coming years?
Yes. So I just did a speech about this. LinkedIn just did a study partnered with Ipsos, a market research firm, where they did a study of all the marketing leaders across the world. So you can break it out per continent. And they basically said, okay, tell us what you're spending your money on, top 1 through 4. And we would think, because right now with the economy, everybody's trying to maximize their ROI, we would think that things like performance marketing, this type of stuff would outrank. It didn't. So the first was lead generation. Makes sense. You know what came in second? Brand and branding. You know what came in fourth? Account-based marketing. So there's definitely a shift.
And like, how do you see, like, because how it was before, just to give an idea, like the bigger shift from how it was before and how it is now, and how you think it's going to evolve further down the line on this respect? Because it means like people are starting to get the idea that branding is important. They're starting to understand it's a big differentiator.
Yeah, they are understanding it's a huge differentiator. And so what this means is that companies are spending more and more in brand, and not just creating the brand, but creating the brand story. So you're starting to see in B2B SaaS a lot more storytelling. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of that in 2025 and 2026.
And technology-wise, have you seen anything, like any big change? I don't want just to end up on AI, but like any big change that you think the impact, or maybe if it is AI, how AI is actually impacting branding, making it easier or more difficult?
I think maybe I'll be a little controversial here. I think it's actually going to make it a little bit more difficult. What we're starting to see with AI, well, let me back up. Not just AI. Let's just go to basic stock imagery that you can get on Adobe, wherever you're going. Isn't it interesting how you start to see the same imagery everywhere? So it's like that same woman at the desk, the same guy at the shop. You're seeing them everywhere. And so that example is now translating to AI. So people are using AI a lot right now for content and product marketing. You're starting to see a lot of the similarities, and the critical thinking is really coming away. And this is one of the things that I'm concerned about. So I think it would actually be more challenging for brand, because you want to be creative and you want to make sure that not everything is the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general with a generative AI making a lot of the execution easier. So the real differentiator will be like on the strategy side of things, like the decision that you take before you actually translating into action. That's going to be it is a big difference. It's going to be more and more, because as you said, like the outputs starting to resemble one another. So the ideas at the beginning, the concepts is going to be the differences. And I think, again, branding actually plugs in quite well into that, because the values of the company are going to make the whole difference. You might have two exact same product, but with different, let's say, values that they're communicating or how they're communicating it. It's going to be quite different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just encourage people, AI is a wonderful tool, but realize that it's a tool. It's not supposed to replace your creativity, and it's not supposed to replace critical thinking. So these are the two things that need to remain the same, which before we wrap, I definitely want to talk about this Jaguar rebrand. Oh my goodness. So it's been flying all over the wires on LinkedIn. So I know everybody's been talking about it, but I think everyone has this question, like, what were they thinking? What's going on behind the scenes there? They took something that was very traditional, tried and true, and also had a lot of brand equity and a lot of brand value. And you could take a picture of that Jaguar and everybody knows what that is. And now they changed it to something that, I don't know, we probably need to get an expert on typography, maybe a design expert. But it seems to me that the typography is blending in. It's almost like if you took the letters of the new typography and you squished them together, I don't even think you could even read what it would say. Like, I'm not clear on the transferability of this new typeface. There's that. And then I saw the ad and I'm like, are we on Mars? Are we on, like, I don't know what your take on that is, but I'm not clear where they were going with this. And I'm not sure, like, every time I talk to different founders and companies about brand, it's that what you believe, like the essence of what you believe. And I'll just kind of, like Cartier, I know it's not the same industry, but they also have kind of the cat kind of image. And they have done a really great job of integrating that into their brand and their ethos. And then you look at Jaguar, which could have done something similar, but they went in a completely different direction. It almost reminds me of when Uber and Netflix keep rebranding and they keep inverting the colors. So like Netflix keeps inverting the red and white and Uber the black and the white. And then they constantly are changing their typography or their typeface, but it's not really doing anything for them. And I figure the same is kind of happening with Jaguar. And there was quite a lot of bright pinks and gradient pinks. And I was very curious to see where they were going to go with that. So I don't know. I'm not clear. And I'm not clear what their belief statement is with the new brand, their story. I'm not clear.
Before we wrap up, do you think there's anything else that we haven't mentioned or talked about that you think it's relevant, specifically, again, about international branding and adapting the brand in different countries?
First of all, there's some companies that they go with one brand globally, and then there's some companies, you'll see it on LinkedIn, this company in Germany, this same one US, same one UK. I would say go with a global brand. Make sure that you have one brand message, one brand value, one brand identity. Because if you start to fractionalize all the brands for the different markets, then you don't have a brand. You have a bunch of different companies. Unless that's the strategic direction of the company, I would say no, keep it one global brand. So Nike stands for one thing and one thing only across the world, same as Apple, same as Google. So take from those playbooks. Now, when you go to the localization of campaigns, that's where you can start to differentiate. That's where you can say, okay, here's the local flavor, the local go-to-market, the local type of value proposition, but the brand identity should definitely stay the same. That is definitely tip number one. Tip number two is for B2B SaaS companies, start your brand as early as possible. Get your brand story and your ethos going as soon as possible. A lot of B2B companies, they start with product marketing first. Mistake. They start with performance marketing first. Mistake. So a lot of them will tell you, oh, but we need fast traction. We need fast leads. But what happens is they start wasting money in all those leads and they don't turn out to be reflective of the ICP they're going for because they haven't articulated who they're going for. So this is one of the things I talk to a lot of different founders and operators in B2B SaaS about, usually after they've gone through 2 rounds of what I call the roller coaster of death, spending a bunch of money, it's not getting the leads, oh my gosh, do we have a brand? And they keep doing this. And only after they have 2 rounds of burning through budget, then they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. Those are the 2 tips.
But just on the second one, is because what you're saying is if you have a solid branding in place, all the metrics are going to go so much better because people will know you when you get in touch. You're not just a stranger out of nowhere. And that will basically ease up the whole, let's say, customer journey.
Yes, and it will create a mix of organic and paid. And it's the organic brand and the ethos and the content and the storytelling. That's what will give you the natural leads over time. And over time, those leads will be cheaper and more precise. Versus paid marketing, a lot of early stage founders, they want to do that right because they want to show wins right away. They want the equation. Everybody wants this equation. You put in $1 1 year, you get out this. It doesn't work that way in the very early stages because you're still establishing yourself. You can start to do your channel mix later on, but at the early stages, people need to know who you are, what your story is, what your belief system is, why you're doing what you're doing. Then you go in and do product marketing and activities like those afterwards.
And one last question related to this. How long do you think it takes once you start actually doing branding initiatives for a brand to start to, let's say, take off? And if that changes when you go international, or is somehow you're starting from scratch when you go in a new country?
It depends on when you start. If you start from scratch and you start at the beginning, I would say it would take a good 6 months to a year. Most teams I've seen have not been able to even do a brand launch or a new rebrand in less than 6 months. So it takes a while to put everything together, not just your story, but all of the digital assets and get it going, plus your content machine. So it will take a little bit of time. But once you have it established, you will keep building it. And it's that curve that will constantly go up and to the right. So it'll give back over time. For later stage companies, sometimes it can take a little longer because they forgot to do it. And then what happens is they have different, I'll call sub-brands in different international markets. And for those listeners that are operators, you all have heard that dichotomy, right? Who can decide? Corporate decides this, local regional teams decide that. And then this is where you get that fractionalization. Company X corporate, company X, I'm making this up, Brazil, wherever it is, Argentina, UK, but they look like completely different companies. And you go to the different websites, they look completely different. If you've gotten to that stage, basically you need to stop, rethink, reevaluate the brand and make it holistic and centralized. And the campaigns should then be localized, but that's the difference.
Yeah, I've seen as well, like it's much more beneficial where you have like centralized the brand identity and then you just localize specific, let's say, aspects of the campaigns. Yeah. It might be sometimes just changing the, let's say, the case studies like with local companies. Sometimes it might be just that, but the whole core is the same. Yeah, absolutely. So it was a very interesting conversation. I don't know if you want to add anything else. Otherwise, we can wrap it up here.
No, just start your brand, start it early.
That's a great advice to close on.
Thanks for joining us today. The Multilingual Content Podcast is powered by Undertow. We help companies translate their content into results. Get in touch if you want to know more. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episode. See you next time.